Every shift at Bella Vista started the same way, with my broken arm throbbing like a metronome of misery, reminding me that my life had become a series of compromises I never wanted to make. The cast felt heavier today, probably because I'd been favoring my left side while carrying trays for nearly 3 weeks now, and the constant ache had settled deep into my bones. The restaurant's signature scent of garlic, basil, and expensive wine usually made my mouth water, but today it mingled with the metallic taste of fear that had been coating my tongue since Vincent's men found me. I adjusted my black uniform dress for the 100th time, trying to hide the slight swell of my belly that grew more noticeable each day. At 13 weeks, I was still able to conceal the pregnancy, but not for much longer. The fabric strained just enough to make me paranoid that someone would notice, that they'd ask questions I couldn't answer. My reflection in the polished surface of the coffee machine showed a pale woman with dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back so severely it made my cheekbones look sharp enough to cut glass. "Vanessa, Table 7 needs their wine order," called Monica, the shift supervisor, her voice carrying the particular edge it always had when she was stressed. She'd been watching me carefully since I'd returned to work with the cast, probably wondering if I was going to be more liability than asset. Fair enough. I wondered the same thing myself. I picked up the bottle of Barolo with my good hand, cradling it against my body as I'd learned to do with everything now. The dining room of Bella Vista was stunning in the way only old money could achieve. Cream-colored walls adorned with original artwork, crystal chandeliers that threw dancing shadows across white tablecloths, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the city's glittering skyline. It was the kind of place where a single meal cost more than I made in a week, where power brokers and politicians came to make deals over perfectly prepared osso buco. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was serving people who lived the life I'd once been destined for, before everything went to hell. "Excuse me," I murmured to the elderly couple at table 7, setting down their wine with practiced grace despite the awkwardness of doing it one-handed. "Your server will be right with you for dinner orders." The man barely glanced at me, already deep in conversation about stock portfolios and market volatility. To him, I was invisible, just another piece of the restaurant's carefully crafted atmosphere. I preferred it that way. Invisibility had become my greatest asset. As I turned to head back to the service station, Monica appeared at my elbow, her face flushed with the particular combination of excitement and anxiety that meant only one thing: VIP guests. "Vanessa, I need you to take the private dining room," she said in a low voice, glancing around as if the walls had ears. In a place like Bella Vista, they probably did. Very important clients. They specifically requested our most discreet service. My stomach clenched, and not from morning sickness. "Monica, I really think someone else would be better suited. With my arm—" "They asked for you specifically," she interrupted, and something in her tone made my blood run cold. "By name." The words hit me like ice water. No one here knew my real name. I'd been working under Sarah Collins for the past 3 months, ever since I'd fled my old life and found refuge in this job that asked no questions and paid in cash. The social security number was fake, the references fabricated, but Monica had needed warm bodies for the busy season and hadn't looked too closely at my credentials. "That's impossible," I whispered. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt the familiar sensation of walls closing in, of options disappearing one by one. Monica's expression softened slightly, probably reading the panic in my face. "Look, sweetheart, I don't know what's going on, but these aren't the kind of people you say no to. Trust me on this. Just smile, serve their drinks, and don't linger. They'll probably tip better than your rent." She pressed a tray into my good hand. Premium whiskey, 2 glasses, a bottle of water, and what looked like a humidor of cigars. The weight of it made my arm ache, but that was nothing compared to the dread settling in my chest like a stone. The private dining room was located down a hallway, lined with photographs of the restaurant's illustrious history. Politicians, movie stars, business magnates, all smiling over perfectly plated meals. My footsteps were muffled by the thick carpet, but each one felt like it was echoing through my entire body. At the end of the hall, double doors of dark wood stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling through the gap. I could hear voices, low, masculine, speaking in what sounded like Italian. My basic understanding of the language, learned during a college semester abroad that felt like a lifetime ago, caught fragments. Business, territory, problems that needed to be handled. I paused outside the door, my free hand instinctively moving to cover my stomach. Whatever was growing inside me was the product of a single night that had changed everything, a moment of weakness that had led to this impossible situation. Victor was in jail awaiting trial, the twin brother I'd tried so desperately to save. But even behind bars, his debts had followed me. His gambling addiction had cost us everything: our family's fortune, our reputation, and eventually my safety. The Russian syndicate he'd borrowed from didn't care that he was locked up. They wanted their money, and they'd decided I would be the one to pay it. Which is how I'd ended up working in one of their money laundering operations, serving drinks and pretending not to notice when briefcases full of cash changed hands under my nose. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I could figure out a way to disappear completely. But now someone had asked for me by name, and that meant my time was up. Taking a deep breath that tasted like fear and resignation, I pushed open the door. The private dining room was even more opulent than the main restaurant. All dark wood paneling, leather chairs, and oil paintings that probably cost more than most people's houses. A mahogany table dominated the center of the space, its surface reflecting the warm glow from a crystal chandelier. But it wasn't the decor that made my blood freeze in my veins. It was the man sitting at the head of the table. Vincent Delacroix looked exactly the same as he had 3 years ago, and completely different all at once. The same steel-gray eyes that could shift from ice to fire in a heartbeat. The same strong jaw covered with precisely trimmed stubble. The same broad shoulders that filled out his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, like it had been sewn directly onto his body. But there was something harder about him now. An edge of darkness that hadn't been there before. Or maybe I'd just been too naive to see it. His gaze found mine across the room, and for a moment, the world stopped spinning. 3 years fell away in an instant, and I was 22 again, drunk on expensive champagne and the intoxicating attention of the most dangerous man I'd ever met. For just a heartbeat, I saw surprise flicker across his features, as if he'd expected someone else, or no one at all. Then his expression shuddered, becoming the unreadable mask I remembered from our final night together. The night I'd discovered what he really was. The night I'd run. "Gentlemen," he said without taking his eyes off me, his voice carrying that same low rasp that used to whisper promises against my skin. "Would you excuse us for a moment? I believe our server and I have some catching up to do." The 2 other men at the table, both large, both clearly armed beneath their expensive suits, exchanged glances before standing and filing out of the room. One of them closed the door behind them with a soft click that sounded like the closing of a coffin lid. We were alone. I stood frozen in the doorway, the tray trembling in my good hand, my cast suddenly feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. Vincent rose from his chair with the fluid grace of a predator, his movements economical and precise. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just gotten smaller. His presence filled the room like smoke, making it hard to breathe. "Hello, Vanessa," he said, and my name on his lips sounded like both a caress and a threat. "You look." His gaze traveled deliberately down my body, lingering on the cast, the slight changes pregnancy had made to my figure, before returning to my face. "Different." "It's Sarah now," I managed to say, hating how my voice shook. "Sarah Collins." His mouth curved in what might have been a smile if it had contained any warmth. "Is it?" How practical. He moved closer, and I caught that familiar scent of his cologne, sandalwood and spice and something indefinably masculine that had once made me dizzy with want. Now it just made me dizzy with terror. "You're hurt," he observed, nodding toward my cast. It wasn't a question. I fell. I lied automatically, the same story I'd been telling everyone for weeks. "Did you?" His tone suggested he knew exactly how I'd gotten injured, and it had nothing to do with falling. How unfortunate. Accidents can be so. Painful. The words were neutral, but the underlying threat was clear. Vincent Delacroix didn't believe in coincidences, and he sure as hell didn't believe in accidents. He'd built his empire on reading between the lines, on knowing what people weren't telling him. And right now, he was reading me like an open book. "I should get back to work," I said, taking a step backward toward the door. "Your drinks can wait." He moved smoothly to block my path, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "We have so much to discuss. 3 years is a long time, cara mia. I've wondered where you went, what you've been doing, who you've been seeing." The last word carried enough venom to kill, and I realized with growing horror that he knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew about Victor, about the Russians, about all of it. Vincent had always been thorough, but this went beyond simple information gathering. This was surveillance. This was hunting. "I don't know what you think you know," I started, but he cut me off with a raised hand. "I know you disappeared from your apartment in the middle of the night 3 years ago, leaving behind everything I'd given you. I know you've been working for Dmitry Volkov's organization for the past 3 months, serving drinks and keeping your mouth shut while they launder money through this establishment. I know your brother Victor owes them more money than you could earn in 10 lifetimes, and I know they're using you as collateral." Each word was delivered with surgical precision, cutting away my illusions of safety until I stood naked and exposed before him. But he wasn't finished. "And I know," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout, "that the child you're carrying is mine." The tray slipped from my nerveless fingers, crashing to the floor in an explosion of glass and whiskey. The sound seemed to echo forever in the sudden silence, and I found myself staring into Vincent's eyes, seeing my own reflection multiplied in their gray depths. He knew. He knew everything. "How?" The word came out as barely a breath. "Did you really think you could hide from me forever?" He reached out slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal, and touched my face with fingers that were surprisingly gentle. "I've had people watching the Russians for months." Imagine my surprise when reports started coming in about a pregnant waitress who looked remarkably like someone I used to know, someone I've been looking for. "I never meant for any of this to happen," I whispered, and hated myself for the way my voice broke. "I know." His thumb traced across my cheekbone, wiping away a tear I didn't realize had fallen. "But it has happened, and now we need to discuss what comes next." "There is no next," I said, finding some reserve of strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'm not going back to that life. I'm not going back to you." Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, maybe, or anger. With Vincent, the two were often indistinguishable. "That's where you're wrong, Kara," he said softly. "You were never really gone. You were just misplaced. But now you're found, and you're coming home with me. Tonight." "No." The word came out stronger than I felt. "I won't be your property again." "Property?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you think you were to me? Property?" "I know what I was," I shot back, anger finally overriding fear. "I was your escape from the family business, Your way of pretending you were something other than what you are. But when it came down to choosing between me and your empire, you made your choice. You left, he said, and for the first time, there was genuine emotion in his voice. You left without a word, without an explanation. I woke up and you were gone, like you'd never existed. Because I found out what you really do. The words exploded out of me. I found out about the families you destroy, the people who disappear, the blood on your hands. Did you think I was going to just smile and pretend I didn't know you were a killer? I never lied to you about what I was. You never told me the truth either. We stared at each other across the wreckage of broken glass and spilled whiskey. 3 years of hurt and anger and longing crackling in the air between us. I could see the war playing out in his expression. The man who had once whispered poetry in Italian while making love to me, and the Don who had ordered men's deaths with the same casual ease as ordering dinner. It doesn't matter now, he said finally. What's done is done. But the child you're carrying is my blood, my heir, and I will not allow my child to be raised in the shadow of the Russian bratva, no matter what happened between us. You can't just take me, I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew how naive they sounded. Vincent Delacroix could do whatever he wanted. That was the point of being who he was. I can, he corrected gently. But I'd prefer if you came willingly. For the baby's sake, if not your own. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. He would protect his child, with or without my cooperation. And if I refused to go willingly, there were other ways to ensure compliance, ways that might not be quite so pleasant. I looked around the ruined room, taking in the shattered glass, the overturned chairs, the evidence of the life I'd tried so hard to build crashing down around me. Outside the door, I could hear voices, Monica calling my name with increasing urgency, probably wondering why the private dining room sounded like a war zone. There was no escape. There never had been. From the moment I'd stepped foot in this restaurant, I'd been living on borrowed time. The Russians had owned me, used me, and eventually they would have disposed of me when I was no longer useful. At least with Vincent, my child would be safe, protected, loved even in his own complicated way. If I come with you, I said slowly, what happens to Victor? Your brother made his own choices. They led him to where he is now. That's not an answer. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, considering. The Russians will be. Disappointed to lose their leverage over you, but they're practical people. Given the right incentive, they can be convinced to write off his debt. What kind of incentive? His smile was sharp as a blade. The kind only I can provide. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of the decision settling over me like a burial shroud. But when I opened them again, Vincent was still there, still waiting, still offering me the only choice that would keep my child safe. All right, I whispered. I'll come with you. The words tasted like ashes in my mouth, but they were the only ones that mattered. Vincent nodded, as if he'd never doubted what my answer would be. We'll leave now. My men will handle your things. I need to tell Monica. No. His voice was firm but not unkind. You disappear tonight, completely. Sarah Collins ceases to exist. From this moment forward, you're under my protection, and that means leaving this life behind entirely. I wanted to argue, to insist that I at least owed the woman who'd given me work when I needed it an explanation. But I could see from Vincent's expression that this wasn't a negotiation. This was how it had to be. As if summoned by our conversation, the door opened and 2 men entered, the same ones who'd left earlier. They moved with the quiet efficiency of people accustomed to cleaning up messes, already assessing the damage and calculating what needed to be done. Take care of this, Vincent instructed them with a nod toward the broken glass, and settle the account with management. Ms. Collins will not be returning. One of them nodded and began speaking in rapid Italian into a phone, while the other started collecting the larger pieces of glass. It was all very civilized, very businesslike, as if people disappeared from their jobs every day in Vincent's world. Maybe they did. Vincent offered me his arm, the gesture somehow both courteous and possessive. "Shall we?" I looked down at my uniform, at the name tag that read, Sarah, in cheerful script. This woman I'd created, this identity I'd hidden behind. She'd served her purpose, but now she was being discarded like everything else. Taking Vincent's arm felt like signing my own death warrant. But what choice did I have? At least this way, my child would grow up in safety, even if it was the safety of a gilded cage. "Lead the way," I said, and as we walked out of Bella Vista together, leaving the wreckage of my carefully constructed lie behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking toward something far more dangerous than anything I was leaving behind. But for the first time in months, I wasn't walking alone. Vincent's car was exactly what I expected, and nothing like I remembered. The sleek black Bentley waiting at the curb screamed money and power, but it also screamed surveillance. Tinted windows dark enough to hide secrets, chrome detailed enough to reflect approaching threats. As his driver held the door open, I caught sight of the man's jacket falling open to reveal the shoulder holster beneath. Even the driver was armed. The leather interior smelled like Vincent's cologne and expensive tobacco, a combination that transported me back 3 years in an instant. I'd ridden in cars like this before, back when I thought the danger was romantic instead of terrifying. Now I knew better. Now I understood that the luxury was just window dressing for a cage. "Where are we going?" I asked as the car pulled smoothly into traffic. The city lights streaked past the windows like falling stars, each one taking me further from the life I'd tried so hard to build. "Home," Vincent said simply, not looking up from his phone where he was typing rapidly in what looked like Italian. "You'll be safe there while we resolve certain complications." What kind of complications? He finished his message and tucked the phone into his jacket. The Russians aren't going to be pleased about losing their asset. Dmitry Volkov is a practical man, but he's also proud. Having one of his employees simply disappear will be seen as a sign of weakness. "I was never his employee," I said, more sharply than I intended. "I was his prisoner. The distinction won't matter to him." Vincent's voice was matter-of-fact, as if we were discussing the weather instead of my life. "What matters is that you belong to his organization, and now you belong to mine." The word belong sat like acid in my stomach. I don't belong to anyone. This time he did look at me, those steel gray eyes holding mine with uncomfortable intensity. "Don't you?" I wanted to argue, to assert my independence, but the words died in my throat. Because the truth was that I hadn't belonged to myself for months. First Victor's debts had owned me, then fear had owned me, then desperation. At least with Vincent, I knew what I was getting into, sort of. The car turned onto a tree-lined street I recognized. Old money, old families, the kind of neighborhood where secrets were buried deep and questions weren't asked. We pulled through wrought iron gates that closed behind us with an ominous clang, then up a circular drive toward a house that managed to be both beautiful and forbidding. Vincent's estate hadn't changed much in 3 years. The same manicured gardens, the same classical architecture, the same sense of being completely isolated from the outside world. But as we approached the front door, I noticed new additions: security cameras positioned at strategic intervals, motion sensors disguised as garden lights, and what looked like a guardhouse partially hidden behind carefully sculpted hedges. "You've increased security," I observed. "The world has become more dangerous," he replied, helping me out of the car with careful attention to my cast. "For people like us, anyway." Inside, the house was exactly as I remembered. All marble floors and crystal chandeliers and artwork that cost more than most people made in a year. But there were differences here too. Subtle ones that spoke of a man who'd learned not to trust easily. I noticed the way every window had reinforced frames, how every door was slightly heavier than it should be, how certain paintings hung at angles that probably concealed cameras or alarms. "Maria will show you to your room," Vincent said, gesturing to a woman who appeared as if summoned. She was older than I remembered, with silver threading through her dark hair, but her smile was warm and genuine. "Miss Vanessa," she said, and I was surprised by the relief in her voice. "It's so good to have you home." Home. The word felt foreign on my tongue, but coming from Maria, it almost sounded possible. "Hello, Maria," I managed, suddenly remembering how kind she'd been to me before, how she'd tried to teach me to make Vincent's favorite pasta, how she'd always made sure my coffee was exactly the right temperature. "Your old room has been prepared," she continued, "but Mr. Vincent thought you might prefer the suite in the east wing. More privacy, better views." I looked at Vincent questioningly. My old room had been his room, our room, back when I'd believed in fairy tales and happily ever after. The fact that he was offering me somewhere else felt significant, though I wasn't sure if it was consideration or rejection. "The east wing will be fine," I said. Maria nodded and started toward a staircase I'd never seen before. The house was larger than I remembered, or maybe I'd never been allowed to explore all of it. As we climbed, I caught glimpses of rooms that looked like offices, studies lined with legal texts, and what appeared to be a communications center with enough electronic equipment to run a small country. The suite Maria led me to was beautiful, all cream and gold with French doors that opened onto a private balcony overlooking the gardens. But it was also clearly a gilded cage. The windows were bulletproof, the doors reinforced, and I was willing to bet that the lovely balcony was under constant surveillance. "Mr. Vincent had some of your things brought over," Maria said, gesturing to a dresser where I could see familiar items. Jewelry I'd left behind, clothes that no longer fit my changed body, books I'd been reading the night I fled. "How?" I asked. "My apartment was cleaned out months ago." Maria's expression grew carefully neutral. "Mr. Vincent has been hopeful about your return." The implication hit me like a physical blow. He'd kept my things. For 3 years, he'd held on to pieces of our life together like some kind of shrine. It was romantic and terrifying in equal measure. "I'll let you get settled," Maria continued. "Dinner will be ready in an hour if you're feeling up to it." After she left, I stood alone in the beautiful room that felt like a prison cell and tried to process everything that had happened. 6 hours ago, I'd been Sarah Collins, struggling waitress with a fake identity and a secret pregnancy. Now I was Vanessa again, trapped in a world I'd tried so hard to escape, carrying the child of one of the most dangerous men in the city. I moved to the dresser and picked up a photograph I recognized. Vincent and me at some charity gala, both of us smiling, both of us looking so young and naive. He was wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars, and I was in a silver gown that had made me feel like a princess. We looked happy. We looked like we belonged together. But that picture had been taken before I knew what Vincent really did for a living. Before I understood that the money paying for our fairy tale came from drugs and violence and fear. Before I learned that the man who whispered poetry in my ear by night was the same one who ordered executions by day. A soft knock at the door interrupted my brooding. "Come in," I called, expecting Maria. Instead, Vincent entered, carrying what looked like a medical bag. He'd changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a white button-down shirt that somehow made him look both more casual and more dangerous. "I brought a doctor," he said without preamble. "Dr. Reeves is downstairs. I'd like him to examine your arm, make sure it's healing properly." "It's fine," I said automatically. "It's not." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You've been working on it too soon, and I can see you're in pain. The cast should have been changed at least once by now." He was right, of course. I'd been ignoring the persistent ache, the way my fingers sometimes went numb. The fact that the cast itself was starting to smell despite my best efforts to keep it clean. But admitting that felt like admitting weakness. I couldn't afford follow-up care, I said finally. Something flickered in his eyes. Anger, maybe, or regret. You should have called me. Should I? After the way things ended between us? Yes. The word was simple, absolute. Whatever happened between us, whatever you thought of me, you should have called. I would have helped you. Even though I left you? Especially because you left me. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. This was the Vincent I'd fallen in love with. The one who could be vulnerable beneath all the armor, who could admit to feeling hurt without losing his strength. Dr. Reeves is completely discreet, he continued. He's been the family physician for 20 years. He'll also want to check on the baby. Make sure everything is progressing normally. How do you know so much about my pregnancy? I asked. I've barely told anyone. You've been eating differently. Your body language changed. And you've been unconsciously protecting your stomach whenever someone gets too close. He shrugged, as if his observational skills were nothing unusual. I noticed things. You've been watching me that closely. I've been watching you since the day you disappeared. The admission should have terrified me, but instead, it sent an unwelcome warmth through my chest. Even after I'd left him, even after I'd rejected everything he offered, he'd been keeping tabs on me, protecting me from a distance. The Russians, I said suddenly. You knew what was happening to me. I knew you were working for them. I knew they were using you. I didn't know. He paused, his jaw tightening. I didn't know they'd hurt you. They didn't break my arm, I said quietly. That was my brother's friend Marcus. He was trying to collect on Victor's debt, and I got in the way. Vincent's expression went completely still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Where is Marcus now? I don't know. He disappeared after it happened. He disappeared, Vincent repeated, and I realized with a chill that Marcus probably hadn't disappeared voluntarily. Good. The casual way he said it reminded me exactly who I was dealing with. Vincent Delacroix didn't just make problems go away. He made people go away. And apparently he'd been doing it for me long before I knew I needed protection. You've been handling things, I said. It wasn't a question. I've been handling things, he confirmed. The Russians think they own you, but they've been very carefully managed in what they're allowed to do. Dmitry Volkov likes to believe he's in control, but he's been operating within boundaries he doesn't even realize exist. What kind of boundaries? Vincent moved closer, and I caught that familiar scent again. Sandalwood and spice and something uniquely him. The kind that keep you alive and relatively safe while I figured out how to extract you without starting a war. And now you're here, which means the careful management period is over. Dmitry will retaliate, probably tonight. He'll see taking you as an act of aggression that demands a response. My blood ran cold. What kind of response? The violent kind. Vincent's voice was matter of fact, as if we were discussing dinner plans instead of potential warfare. Which is why you'll be staying here under guard until the situation is resolved. For how long? However long it takes. The casualness of his tone didn't fool me. Whatever was coming, it was going to be brutal. Men were going to die because of me. Because I'd gotten pregnant by the wrong man and fallen into the wrong trap. The weight of that responsibility settled over me like a burial shroud. I should never have come back, I whispered. You didn't have a choice, Vincent said gently. And neither did I. The moment I learned you were carrying my child, your fate was sealed. I will not allow my heir to be raised by wolves, no matter what the cost. And if I refuse to stay, if I try to leave? He was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully. Then you'll discover that this house has many ways of keeping people safe. Some of them are more comfortable than others. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. I could stay willingly, or I could stay unwillingly. But I would stay. My choice was in how much freedom I had within my captivity. A knock at the door interrupted the tense moment. "Mr. Vincent," Maria's voice called. "Dr. Reeves is ready." "We'll be right down," Vincent replied, then looked at me. "After the doctor examines you, we'll have dinner. You need to eat properly now. You're not just feeding yourself anymore." The possessiveness in his voice when he mentioned the baby should have annoyed me. Instead, it sent that unwelcome warmth through my chest again. For all his talk of heirs and bloodlines, there was genuine concern in his eyes. Whatever else Vincent was, he would love this child, fiercely, completely, dangerously. Maybe that would be enough. "All right," I said. "But I want to call Victor. I want to make sure he's safe." "Victor is fine," Vincent said. "In fact, his situation has improved considerably since this afternoon." "What do you mean?" Vincent's smile was sharp as a blade. "It seems someone paid off his debt to the Russians in full, plus interest. He's being released tomorrow morning." I stared at him, understanding dawning slowly. "You already handled it. I told you I was good at solving problems." "How much did you pay them?" "Does it matter?" "It does to me." Vincent was quiet for a moment, studying my face. $2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $2 million. More money than I could comprehend, paid without hesitation to free a brother who'd destroyed our family and put my life in danger. "Why?" I whispered. "Because he's your brother. Because you love him, despite everything he's done. Because I love you. And I always have." The last sentence hung in the air between us like a bridge. I wasn't sure I was ready to cross. Vincent had said those words before. Back when I'd believed them. Back when I'd thought love could conquer anything. Now I knew better. Now I understood that love and danger could coexist. That someone could destroy you and save you in the same breath. "Vincent, don't," he said softly. "Don't say anything you're not ready to mean. We have time now. All the time in the world." He offered me his arm again, the same gesture from the restaurant that had started this whole chain of events. This time, when I took it, it felt less like surrender and more like a choice. "Come," he said. "Let's make sure you and the baby are healthy. Everything else can wait." As we walked toward the door together, I caught sight of our reflection in the mirror. Vincent tall and commanding in his casual clothes, me small and uncertain beside him, both of us marked by the years we'd spent apart. We looked like strangers trying to remember how to be familiar. But beneath that, I could see the ghost of who we used to be. The couple in the photograph, young and hopeful, and so sure that love would be enough. Maybe it wouldn't be enough this time either. Maybe I was walking deeper into a trap that would destroy what was left of my soul. But for the first time in months, I wasn't walking alone, and maybe that would have to be sufficient. Outside the window, night was falling over the city, and somewhere in the darkness, dangerous men were making dangerous plans. But here, in this moment, with Vincent's steady presence beside me, and his child growing safe inside me, I felt something I'd almost forgotten how to feel. I felt protected. Whether that was salvation or damnation remained to be seen. Dr. Reeves turned out to be a grandfatherly man with kind eyes and gentle hands, who treated my rebroken arm with the same careful attention he might give a piece of priceless porcelain. The new cast was lighter, properly fitted, and came with a stern lecture about proper care and follow-up appointments. "The baby appears to be developing normally," he said after the ultrasound. his voice professionally neutral despite the unusual circumstances of the examination. Heartbeat is strong. Measurements are right on track for 13 weeks. However, he fixed me with a stern look. You need to reduce your stress levels significantly. Chronic anxiety isn't good for either of you. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Reduce stress while living in the house of a mafia don, carrying his child, and waiting for a war to break out with the Russian mob. Sure, no problem. She'll have all the rest she needs, Vincent said from his position by the window, where he'd been standing like a sentinel throughout the entire examination. Whatever you recommend, doctor. Prenatal vitamins, proper nutrition, moderate exercise, and minimal stress, Dr. Reeves said, packing up his equipment. I'll return in 2 weeks to check on both the arm and the pregnancy. After he left, Vincent and I sat down to dinner in a dining room that managed to be both intimate and intimidating. The table could have seated 20, but it had been set for 2, with crystal glasses and silver that caught the candlelight like tiny stars. Maria had outdone herself. Homemade pasta with a sauce that smelled like heaven, fresh bread that was still warm from the oven, and a salad made with herbs from the garden. You remembered, I said, taking my first bite of the pasta. It was exactly how I liked it, with just enough spice to warm my throat without overwhelming the delicate flavor of the tomatoes. I remember everything about you, Vincent said quietly. Your favorite foods, how you take your coffee, the way you used to read 3 books at once and leave them scattered around the house. That must have driven you crazy. It was charming. His voice carried a warmth I hadn't heard in years. The house felt alive when you were in it. After you left, it was just empty. We ate in relative silence for a while, both of us navigating the strange territory of trying to be comfortable with each other again. I found myself watching him when I thought he wasn't looking, cataloging the small changes 3 years had made. New lines around his eyes, a thin scar along his jawline that hadn't been there before, a tension in his shoulders that spoke of constant vigilance. What happened to your face? I asked, gesturing to the scar. His hand moved unconsciously to touch it. Business disagreement. Nothing that concerns you. Everything about you concerns me now, I said, surprised by my own boldness. If I'm going to be here, if I'm going to raise a child in this world, I need to understand what I'm walking into. Vincent set down his fork and leaned back in his chair, studying me with those penetrating gray eyes. You want the truth? I want the truth. A rival family decided I was getting too comfortable, too content. They thought my distraction over your disappearance made me weak. They were wrong, but not before they managed to get closer than they should have. Distraction? He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. I wasn't myself after you left. I made mistakes, took unnecessary risks. I was looking for you when I should have been watching my back. The admission hung between us like a confession. Vincent Delacroix didn't make mistakes, didn't show weakness, didn't let his emotions compromise his judgment, except he had, because of me. I'm sorry, I said softly. Don't be. It taught me valuable lessons about the cost of letting personal feelings interfere with business. Is that what this is? Business? This is family, he said firmly. Family comes before everything else. Before business, before loyalty, before my own life. You and our child are family now, which means you're under my protection permanently. What if I don't want your protection? Vincent's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the atmosphere of the room, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then you'll have it anyway. Some choices aren't yours to make anymore. Because I'm carrying your child. Because I love you. The words were simple, direct, completely without artifice. I loved you 3 years ago. I've loved you every day since you left, and I'll love you until the day I die. The child makes you untouchable, but my feelings for you make you precious. My breath caught in my throat. Vincent, I know you don't trust me, he continued, as if I hadn't spoken. I know you think I'm a monster, and maybe I am. But I'm your monster, and I'm the father of your child, and that means something whether you want it to or not. I don't think you're a monster, I said quietly. He looked surprised. No, I think you're a man who does monstrous things. There's a difference. Is there? I thought about it, remembering the Vincent I'd known before, the one who'd read Dante to me in Italian, who'd brought me soup when I was sick, who'd held me during thunderstorms because he knew they frightened me. That man was still here, somewhere beneath the hardness and the violence and the power. The man I fell in love with was kind, I said finally. He was gentle with me, protective, without being possessive, patient. He made me feel like I was the most important thing in his world. You were. You are. But that man was also capable of ordering someone's death without blinking, of making people disappear, of building an empire on fear and violence. I met his eyes across the table. I couldn't reconcile those two sides of you. It scared me. It should scare you. It should terrify you. Vincent's voice was harsh, because that's exactly who I am, someone who can love you completely and destroy your enemies without a moment's hesitation, someone who will burn down the world to keep you safe. That's not love, I whispered. That's obsession. With you, they're the same thing. The honesty in his voice was more frightening than any threat. This wasn't the smooth manipulation of a practiced seducer, or the calculated words of a businessman closing a deal. This was raw truth, delivered without apology or explanation. What happened the night I left? I asked suddenly. I never gave you a chance to explain. Vincent was quiet for so long, I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. You found the photos. It wasn't a question. The photos. Crime scene images of a rival family's enforcer. A man who'd been making moves against Vincent's territory. I'd found them scattered across his desk when I'd gone looking for a pen. Stark black and white evidence of what Vincent was capable of when someone crossed him. I found the photos, I confirmed. And the reports. And the financial records showing payments to people for services rendered. You weren't supposed to see those, but I did. And I realized that everything I thought I knew about you was a lie. Not everything. His eyes found mine again. What I felt for you was never a lie. How could I know that? How could I trust anything when I found out the man I was in love with was capable of? I gestured helplessly. Of that. You could have asked me. Would you have told me the truth? Another long silence. Yes. If you'd asked directly, I would have told you, even knowing it might make me leave. Especially knowing that. I believed him. Vincent had many faults, but dishonesty wasn't one of them. He might omit information, might present facts in a way that served his purposes, but he didn't lie outright. If I'd confronted him that night instead of running, he would have told me everything. Why didn't you come after me? I asked. I did. For the first 6 months, I had men looking for you everywhere. But then I realized that maybe you were right to run. Maybe you were better off without me. But you kept my things. I kept hope. The simple statement broke something inside my chest. All this time, I'd told myself that Vincent had moved on, that I'd been nothing more than a temporary distraction from his real life. But he'd kept hope. For 3 years, he'd held on to the possibility that I might come back. I was pregnant when I left, I said suddenly. I just didn't know it yet. Vincent went very still. What? I found out 2 weeks later. I'd been feeling sick, thought it was stress. But it was the baby. I took a shaky breath. I almost called you then. Almost came back. What stopped you? Fear. I was terrified of what kind of world I'd be bringing a child into, what kind of father you'd be. And now? I looked at him across the candlelit table, this dangerous man who'd paid $2 million to free my brother, who'd kept my things like sacred relics, who'd been searching for me for 3 years. Now, I think you'd kill anyone who tried to hurt our child, without hesitation. I think you'd move heaven and earth to give them every advantage, every opportunity, every protection. I would. And I think you'd love them completely, even if they chose a different path than the one you'd planned for them. Vincent's expression softened. Yes. That's what scared me most, I admitted. Not that you'd be a bad father, but that you'd be such a good one that I'd fall in love with you all over again. Would that be so terrible? Loving you was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I've ever experienced. You made me feel alive in ways I didn't know were possible, but you also made me feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, one strong wind away from falling. I never wanted you to feel afraid. I know. But that's what it means to love someone like you. Someone powerful enough to protect me from the world, but also powerful enough to destroy me if things went wrong. Vincent reached across the table and took my hand, his fingers warm and strong against mine. Things won't go wrong this time. How can you be sure? Because this time, you know exactly who I am. You're not going to find any surprises that make you run. And because this time, I know how precious you are, how easily you can slip away. I won't make the same mistakes. What about the Russians? What about the war you said was coming? Dmitry Volkov is a businessman first and a criminal second. He'll make some noise, maybe take a few shots at our operations, but ultimately he'll realize that you're not worth a full-scale conflict, especially not when there are other ways to resolve the situation. What other ways? Vincent's smile was sharp as winter wind. Profitable ways. Ways that leave everyone feeling like they won something. You're going to buy him off. I'm going to make him an offer that's more appealing than revenge. And if he refuses? The smile disappeared. Then I'll remind him why people cross the Delacroix family only once. A chill ran down my spine at the casual menace in his voice. This was the side of Vincent that had sent me running 3 years ago. The cold calculation, the easy acceptance of violence as a solution to problems. But it was also the side that would keep our child safe. I need time, I said quietly, to process all of this, to figure out how to make it work. You have all the time you need. And I need to know that I'm not a prisoner here, that if I decide this isn't the life I want, I can leave. Vincent was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. The man who loved me wanted to give me the freedom I was asking for. The Don who'd just reclaimed what he considered his property wanted to lock me away, where I'd be safe and his. You can leave, he said finally. But our child stays with me. The words hit me like a physical blow. You can't. I can, and I will. I won't allow my heir to grow up unprotected. And I won't allow you to disappear with my child the way you disappeared on me. That's not a choice. That's an ultimatum. It's the only choice I can give you. Stay, and we'll figure out how to make this work between us. Leave, and you leave alone. I stared at him across the table, seeing the absolute certainty in his expression. He meant every word. If I tried to leave with the baby, he would stop me. He had the resources, the connections, the sheer ruthless determination to make sure I never got far. That's not the man I fell in love with, I said. Yes, it is, Vincent replied gently. You just didn't know it yet. The man you fell in love with would have burned down half the city to keep you from leaving the first time, if he'd known about the baby. I'm older now, more patient, but no less determined. So I'm trapped. Your home. The distinction was important to him. I could see it in his eyes. But from where I sat, it felt like the same thing. I need to think, I said, pushing back from the table. Of course. Take all the time you need. As I stood to leave, Vincent caught my hand again. Vanessa? Yes? For what it's worth, I hope you choose to stay. Not for the baby, not for security or protection or any of the practical reasons. I hope you choose to stay because you want to see if we can find our way back to each other. The longing in his voice was almost my undoing. And if we can't, then at least our child will grow up knowing both their parents tried. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and headed toward the door. But his words followed me as I climbed the stairs to my beautiful prison. I hope you choose to stay. The terrible thing was, part of me hoped so too. I slept badly that first night. My dreams full of broken glass and men with guns and the sound of Vincent's voice saying, "You belong to me," over and over until I woke gasping. The pregnancy made everything more vivid, more emotional, and I spent the early morning hours sitting on the balcony watching the sun rise over the gardens while trying to make sense of my situation. From my vantage point, I could see the boundaries of my new world clearly. High stone walls topped with decorative iron that I now realized concealed razor wire. Security cameras positioned to cover every angle. Guard posts disguised as garden features. The estate was beautiful, but it was also a fortress, and I was both its most precious treasure and its most carefully guarded prisoner. Maria brought breakfast on a silver tray, fresh fruit, warm pastries, and coffee that had been perfectly prepared, despite the fact that my preferences had changed since the pregnancy began. Somehow, Vincent had noticed and communicated those changes to his staff. The attention to detail should have been comforting. Instead, it reminded me how thoroughly I was being observed. "Mr. Vincent asked me to give you this," Maria said, placing an envelope beside my orange juice. "He had to leave early for business, but he'll be back this afternoon." After she left, I opened the envelope with curious fingers. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper with Vincent's distinctive handwriting. "Cara Mia, I know this is overwhelming. Take the time you need to adjust. Explore the house, the grounds, anything you want to see. Maria will show you the library. I had your favorite books brought over, plus some new ones I thought you might enjoy. Dr. Martinez will be here at 2 p.m. to discuss proper prenatal care. She's a specialist, completely discreet, and she'll be managing your pregnancy from now on. I've had to handle some business regarding our conversation last night, but I should return by dinner. We can talk more then if you're ready. All my love, VPS. Check the third drawer of the dresser. I had something made for you." Despite everything, I found myself smiling at the postscript. Vincent had always loved surprising me with little gifts, never anything ostentatious or demanding, just small, thoughtful gestures that showed he'd been thinking about me. I was curious despite myself. The third drawer held a small jewelry box I didn't recognize. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a delicate gold chain with a pendant that took my breath away. It was a tiny tree of life, its branches reaching upward and its roots spreading wide, rendered in gold so fine it seemed to glow. Embedded in the trunk was a single small diamond that caught the morning light like a star. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Growth, strength, new beginnings rooted in the past. It was beautiful and meaningful, and probably cost more than most people's cars, but it felt personal in a way that expensive jewelry rarely did. I found myself putting it on, the delicate chain settling just below my collarbone like it belonged there. True to Vincent's suggestion, I spent the morning exploring. The library was exactly as he'd promised, my old favorites carefully organized alongside new releases he'd thought I might enjoy. Someone had been curating this collection for 3 years, choosing books based on my tastes, my interests, my evolving preferences. It was both touching and unsettling. I discovered rooms I'd never seen before. A music room with a grand piano that looked like it was regularly tuned and played. An art studio with north-facing windows and supplies that were still fresh. A small greenhouse attached to the kitchen where Maria grew herbs and vegetables. The house felt lived in, but also carefully maintained, as if Vincent had been preparing for my return all along. It was in the study that I found the photographs. They were in a frame on Vincent's desk, not displayed prominently, but placed where he could see them while he worked. Pictures of us from before, but also newer ones I didn't remember posing for. Me at the restaurant, walking to work, sitting in a coffee shop reading a book. 3 years of surveillance disguised as protection. 3 years of a man keeping watch over someone who'd left him. I wondered when you'd find those. I spun around to find Vincent standing in the doorway, still wearing his suit from whatever business had called him away that morning. His tie was loosened and his hair was slightly mussed, giving him a rumpled elegance that was somehow more appealing than perfect grooming. "How long have you been watching me?" I asked. "Since the day you disappeared." He moved into the room, loosening his cufflinks with practiced movements. "At first it was about finding you, bringing you home. Later it became about making sure you were safe." "Even when I was working for your enemies?" "Especially then." Vincent's expression grew hard. "Do you think it was an accident that the Russians never pushed you too far? That they never demanded more from you than serving drinks and keeping quiet? I made it very clear what would happen if they crossed certain lines. You were controlling them. I was protecting you. There's a difference." "Is there?" I echoed his words from the night before. "With you, always." I studied the photographs again, seeing them differently now. Not evidence of stalking, but proof of caring. A man who couldn't let go, who'd spent 3 years making sure the woman he loved stayed safe, even though she'd rejected him. "The pendant," I said, touching the delicate gold at my throat. "When did you have it made?" 2 years ago. I saw you looking at something similar in a shop window. You stood there for almost 10 minutes, just staring at it, and then you walked away. I had that one designed specifically for you. 2 years ago, I was broke. I couldn't afford to buy jewelry. I know. That's why I had it made. I thought someday when you came home, you might want something beautiful to mark new beginnings. The thoughtfulness of it undid me. This wasn't a man trying to buy my affection with expensive gifts. This was someone who'd noticed what caught my attention, who'd remembered a moment of longing I'd probably forgotten myself, who'd commissioned something meaningful just in case he got the chance to give it to me. You were so sure I'd come back. I was so hopeful you would. What if I hadn't? What if I'd never gotten involved with the Russians, never been forced back into your world? Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. I would have kept watching, kept hoping, kept making sure you were safe, whether you knew it or not. For how long? Forever. The simple certainty in his voice sent a shiver through me. That's not healthy, Vincent. Probably not. But it's honest. I moved away from the desk, away from the photographs and the evidence of his 3-year vigil, needing space to think. The room felt smaller with him in it, charged with electricity that made it hard to breathe normally. "Dr. Martinez examined me this afternoon," I said, changing the subject to safer ground. "And? The baby is fine, healthy. She wants to see me weekly until we're past the first trimester, then every 2 weeks after that." "Good. I've arranged for her to have full access to the house. She'll coordinate with Dr. Reeves to make sure you're getting comprehensive care." "Vincent, this level of attention, it's not necessary. This is a normal pregnancy, not a medical emergency." "Nothing about you is normal," he said simply. "You're carrying my child, which makes this the most important pregnancy in the world as far as I'm concerned." The possessiveness in his voice should have annoyed me. Instead, It sent that unwelcome warmth through my chest again. When was the last time someone had treated me like I was precious? When was the last time I'd felt truly protected instead of just protected by necessity? There's something else we need to discuss, Vincent continued, moving to pour himself a drink from the crystal decanter on the side table. Dmitry Volkov requested a meeting. My blood chilled. What kind of meeting? The civilized kind. He wants to negotiate. For my return? For compensation. Vincent's voice was carefully neutral. He sees you as an asset that was stolen from him. He wants to be made whole. I'm not an asset. I'm a person. You're a person who knows details about his operation. A person who's been inside his organization for months. A person who could potentially testify against him if the wrong people came asking the right questions. Vincent met my eyes. To him, you're a significant liability walking around free. So what does he want? Money, territory, or you back where you were, keeping your mouth shut and serving his purposes? And you told him? Vincent's smile was sharp enough to cut steel. I told him we'd meet tomorrow night to discuss terms. Neutral ground, minimal security, just a conversation between businessmen. You're going to pay him off. I'm going to explain why that won't be necessary. Something in his tone made my stomach clench with apprehension. Vincent, what are you planning? I'm planning to resolve this situation permanently. He finished his drink and set the glass down with careful precision. Dmitry Volkov has been a problem for a long time. He's been moving drugs through territory that belongs to my family, skimming profits from businesses under our protection, and generally conducting himself like he owns this city. Taking you was just the excuse I needed to address these issues. This isn't about me at all, is it? It's about you. And it's about business. And it's about making sure no one ever thinks they can use what's mine against me again. The possessiveness in his voice was absolute, uncompromising. I was his, the baby was his, and anyone who threatened either of us was going to learn exactly what that meant. What if something goes wrong? What if he doesn't want to negotiate? Then he'll discover why my family has controlled this territory for 4 generations. People will die. People will make choices, Vincent corrected, and they'll live with the consequences of those choices, just like we all do. I sank into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, suddenly exhausted. This is what I was afraid of. This is why I left. Because I protect what's mine. Because you solve problems with violence. Because you see everything as a transaction or a territory dispute. Because you can talk about people dying like you're discussing the weather. Vincent studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved around the desk and knelt beside my chair, bringing us to eye level. Look at me, he said gently. When I met his gaze, I saw not the cold dawn, but the man I'd fallen in love with. I know what I am. I know what I do. I make hard choices so the people I love don't have to. I get blood on my hands so yours stay clean. I become the monster so you can stay innocent. I don't want to be innocent if it means you have to be a monster. But that's not your choice to make. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining with careful tenderness. This is who I am, cara mia. This is what I do. I can't change that, and I wouldn't want to. But I can make sure that you and our child are protected from all of it. Protected and complicit. Protected and loved. It's not enough. It's all I have to offer. The honesty in his voice broke my heart a little. Vincent wasn't promising to change, wasn't offering to leave his life behind for me. He was asking me to accept him exactly as he was. Violence and tenderness, protection and possession, love and danger all wrapped together in one impossible package. If I stay, I said slowly, if I choose this life, I need certain things. Name them. I need to know that our child will have choices, that they won't be forced into this world if they don't want it. Agreed. I need to know that I have some agency here, that I'm not just a pampered prisoner. Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering. What does that look like to you? I want to work. Nothing dangerous, nothing that compromises your security, but something meaningful. I can't just sit in this beautiful house for the rest of my life. What kind of work? I don't know yet, but something that makes a difference. Something that helps people. We can arrange that. And I want honesty. No more secrets, no more surveillance I don't know about, no more decisions made without consulting me. That's harder, but not impossible. No, Vincent agreed, not impossible. I studied his face, looking for any sign of deception or manipulation, but all I saw was sincerity and something that looked almost like hope. If I agree to this, I said, if I choose to stay and try to make this work, you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that tomorrow night when you meet with Dmitry Volkov, you'll try negotiation before violence. Promise me you'll give him a chance to walk away. Vincent's expression grew very serious. And if he refuses? If he demands your return or threatens our family? Then you do what you have to do. But try the peaceful solution first. You're asking me to show mercy to a man who would hurt you without hesitation. I'm asking you to be the man I fell in love with, the one who believes in honor and family and doing the right thing, even when it's difficult. Vincent was quiet for a long time, and I could see the war playing out behind his eyes. The Don who saw every challenge as something to be crushed was battling with the man who wanted to be worthy of my love. All right, he said finally. I'll try diplomacy first, but if he threatens you or our child in any way, the conversation ends, and the real solution begins. I understand. And you'll stay? You'll try to make this work? I looked around the study, at the photographs on his desk, at the evidence of 3 years of patient hoping, at this man who was kneeling beside my chair asking me to choose him despite everything he was and everything he did. I'll stay, I said. We'll try. The smile that spread across Vincent's face was like sunrise after the longest night. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Ask me again in a year, when we've figured out if this is actually possible. It's possible, Vincent said with absolute certainty. It has to be. He leaned forward and kissed me then, soft and gentle and full of promise. It tasted like hope and danger and the future neither of us could predict, but both of us were willing to fight for. When we broke apart, I touched the pendant at my throat again. New beginnings? New beginnings, Vincent confirmed. Rooted in everything that came before, reaching for everything that's still possible. Outside the study windows, the sun was setting over the gardens, painting everything gold and amber. Tomorrow would bring challenges, negotiations, and possibly violence. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, we were together. We were choosing each other. We were trying to build something beautiful out of the broken pieces of what we'd lost. It might not be enough, but it was a start. The next morning brought news that changed everything. I woke to find Vincent already gone, but Maria delivered a message with my breakfast that made my blood run cold. Dmitry Volkov had moved up the timeline. Instead of a civilized evening meeting, he wanted to see Vincent that afternoon. Neutral ground had become Volkov's territory. Minimal security had become a show of force. Mr. Vincent wants you to know that extra precautions are being taken, Maria said, her usually warm demeanor strained with worry. There will be additional security around the house today. I looked out my bedroom window to see what she meant. Men in expensive suits were positioned at intervals around the garden, their postures casual but alert. Others were checking the perimeter, speaking into earpieces, coordinating with people I couldn't see. The estate had transformed into an armed camp overnight. How many men does Vincent have? I asked. Enough, Maria replied. which wasn't really an answer but told me everything I needed to know. I spent the morning trying to read, trying to eat, trying to do anything that would distract me from the growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. Every time a car passed on the street beyond the walls, every time a phone rang, every time I heard voices speaking in urgent Italian, my heart rate spiked. This was what I'd been afraid of. This was why I'd run 3 years ago. Not just the violence itself, but the constant awareness of it lurking beneath the surface of everyday life. The way normal activities became charged with tension because of what Vincent was, what he did, who he'd made enemies of in the course of building his empire. Dr. Martinez arrived for my scheduled appointment, but even she seemed affected by the atmosphere of barely controlled tension that had settled over the house like fog. "Your blood pressure is elevated," she observed after taking my vitals. "Are you feeling particularly stressed today?" "A little," I admitted, which was like saying the ocean was a little wet. "Stress isn't good for the baby," she said gently. "Is there anything we can do to help you relax?" I almost laughed. Short of sedating me unconscious until Vincent returned safely, there wasn't much that was going to calm my nerves, but I appreciated her concern. "I'll try meditation," I lied. "Good. And if you continue to feel anxious, we can discuss safe options for managing stress during pregnancy." After she left, I found myself gravitating toward Vincent's study, drawn by the need to feel connected to him somehow. The photographs on his desk looked different in the afternoon light, less evidence of obsession, more proof of devotion. A man who'd spent 3 years making sure I was safe, even when I didn't want his protection. I was studying the pictures when I heard the sound of multiple cars pulling up the drive. Through the window, I watched as a convoy of black SUVs approached the house in formation. Vincent was back, but he wasn't alone. The front door opened, and I heard voices in the foyer, Vincent giving instructions in rapid Italian, other men responding with the crisp efficiency of soldiers receiving orders. Footsteps on marble, doors opening and closing, the general commotion of people preparing for something serious. "Vanessa." Vincent appeared in the doorway of the study, still wearing his suit, but with his jacket off and his sleeves rolled up. There was tension in every line of his body, but his expression was carefully controlled. "We need to talk." "What happened?" "Volkov isn't interested in negotiation. He sees your relocation as an act of war, and he intends to respond accordingly." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means he's declared vendetta. Old school, blood for blood, no quarter given." Vincent moved to the window, looking out at the grounds where his men were taking positions. "He wants you back. He wants financial compensation for the insult to his honor, and he wants public acknowledgement that I overstepped my bounds. And if you refuse, then we go to war." The casual way he said it sent ice through my veins. "Vincent, this is insane. I'm not worth starting a war over." He turned from the window, his gray eyes blazing with intensity. "You are worth burning down the entire world. Don't ever let me hear you say otherwise. People will die. People die anyway. The only question is whether they die for something meaningful or something pointless. This isn't meaningful. It's pride. This is family." Vincent's voice was absolute, unyielding. "This is protecting what's mine. This is making sure no one ever thinks they can use you against me again." I sank into one of the chairs, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. 3 hours ago, I'd been worried about stress affecting my pregnancy. Now men were preparing to kill and die because a Russian mobster couldn't accept that I was no longer under his control. "There has to be another way," I said. "There is." Vincent's voice was carefully neutral. "You could go back to him." "What?" "You could return to working for Volkov. Resume your position, keep serving drinks and keeping quiet. Pretend none of this ever happened. He'd probably accept that as sufficient compromise." The suggestion hung in the air between us like a live grenade. "You can't be serious." I'm completely serious. It would solve the immediate problem, prevent unnecessary bloodshed, maintain the peace between our organizations. But I'd have to kill you myself before I let that happen. The matter-of-fact way he said it should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with a strange sense of relief. Whatever else Vincent was, whatever violence he was capable of, his love for me was absolute, uncompromising, dangerous in its intensity, but real. So we're back to war. We're back to war. A knock at the door interrupted us. One of Vincent's men entered, tall, dark-haired, with the kind of scars that spoke of violence survived rather than avoided. "Boss," he said in accented English. "Marco's here with the reports." "Send him in." Marco turned out to be a thin man, with nervous eyes and ink-stained fingers, who looked more like an accountant than a soldier, which I realized he probably was. "We've got movement on 3 fronts," Marco reported, consulting a tablet. "Volkov's people are positioned outside the restaurant, the warehouse district, and the marina. They're not making any moves yet, just waiting." "How many?" "Maybe 30, 40 guys, spread thin, but armed." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. "What about our people?" "In position. Tony's got the waterfront covered, Sal's handling downtown, and Rico's got teams mobile for rapid response." "Good. What about the police?" "Captain Morrison called. He's heard rumors about something big going down. Wants to know if he should be concerned." "Tell him to keep his people away from the industrial district tonight. Routine patrol only." Marco nodded and left, taking his reports and his nervous energy with him. Vincent moved to the desk and began checking the weapons in the drawer, a routine so practiced it was clearly habit. "You have police in your pocket," I observed. "I have friends in various places who understand that sometimes it's better to look the other way." Corruption. Practical politics. Vincent checked the clip of a small pistol before slipping it into a shoulder holster I hadn't noticed before. "The world isn't black and white, cara mia. It's all shades of gray, and sometimes you have to work within that reality. What happens to me during all this? You stay here, safe, protected. The house is a fortress. Volkov would need an army to get through our defenses, and he doesn't have an army. And if something happens to you?" Vincent paused in his preparations, his expression growing very serious. "If something happens to me, you'll be protected. I've made arrangements, financial, legal, personal. You and the baby will be taken care of, no matter what." "By who?" "My cousin Alessandro runs operations in Chicago. He's good people, family man, completely trustworthy. If anything goes wrong tonight, he'll make sure you're safe." The casual way he discussed his own potential death made my chest tight with panic. "Nothing's going to go wrong." "Probably not, but I don't believe in leaving things to chance." "Vincent, I need you to promise me something." He moved to where I sat, kneeling beside the chair the way he had the day before. "If something happens, if this goes badly, I need you to promise you'll let Alessandro help you. Don't try to run. Don't try to disappear. Let the family protect you." "I promise," I whispered, because what else could I say? "And I need you to promise that you'll tell our child about me. Not just the bad parts, the good parts too. The way I loved you both. The way I would have done anything to keep you safe." "Vincent, stop. You're coming back." "Promise me." "I promise." He kissed me then, deep and desperate, like a man going off to war, which, I realized, he was. "I love you," he said against my lips. "I've loved you since the moment I met you, and I'll love you until my last breath." "I love you too." The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise him. But they were true. Despite everything, the violence, the danger, The impossible situation we'd found ourselves in. I loved Vincent Delacroix. I loved his strength and his gentleness, his protection and his possession, his ability to be tender with me while being ruthless with the world. "When this is over," he said, "when Volkov is no longer a threat, we're going to have a proper wedding. Something beautiful, something worthy of you, something that makes you officially mine in every way that matters." Is that a proposal? That's a promise. Another knock at the door brought reality crashing back. "Boss, it's time." Vincent stood, straightening his jacket and checking his weapons one final time. The transformation was remarkable. The gentleman who'd been kneeling beside my chair disappeared, replaced by the Don, who commanded respect through fear and violence. "I'll be back by midnight," he told me. "Don't wait up. Be careful. Always am." He paused at the door, looking back at me one more time. "Vanessa? Yes, when I come back, we're going to start planning our future. Really planning it. No more uncertainty, no more half measures. We're going to build something beautiful together. I'd like that." He smiled. The first genuine, uncomplicated smile I'd seen from him since this all began. "So would I." And then he was gone, taking half the air in the room with him. I sat alone in the study as the sun set and darkness fell over the estate. Outside, I could hear the quiet movements of the security team, the low murmur of radio communications, the general sense of people preparing for battle. Somewhere across the city, Vincent was meeting with Dmitry Volkov to discuss terms neither of them intended to accept. Somewhere, men were positioning themselves for violence that might or might not come. Somewhere, decisions were being made that would determine whether the man I loved came home to me or whether I'd be raising our child alone. I touched the pendant at my throat, the tree of life Vincent had commissioned for me 2 years ago, when he'd still been hoping I'd come home. New beginnings rooted in the past, reaching toward an uncertain future. All I could do was wait and hope, and trust that the man I'd chosen to love was smart enough and strong enough and ruthless enough to survive whatever was coming. Outside the window, the night was full of shadows and promise and potential violence. Inside the house, I was safe and protected and utterly helpless. And somewhere in between those two realities, our future was being decided by men with guns and no mercy. The call came at 11:47 p.m. I'd been pacing the study for hours, alternating between staring out the window and checking my phone every 30 seconds. The house was eerily quiet. Even the security team had gone silent, which somehow made everything feel more ominous rather than less. When Vincent's phone rang on his desk, I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Hello?" I answered, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "Vanessa." Vincent's voice was rough, strained. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. Are you? You sound—" "I'm fine. Listen to me carefully. There's been a complication." My heart stopped. What kind of complication? Volkov brought more people than we anticipated. The meeting was a setup. He never intended to negotiate. He wanted to eliminate me and use you as leverage to take over my territory. "Where are you now?" "Safe. But the situation isn't resolved. In fact, it's about to get significantly more complicated." "What do you mean?" "Volkov made a mistake tonight. He threatened you directly, in front of witnesses. Made it clear that he sees you and the baby as tools to be used against me." The cold certainty in Vincent's voice sent ice through my veins. "Vincent, what did you do?" "What I had to do." The line went quiet for a moment, and I could hear voices in the background. Men speaking in rapid Italian, the sound of cars, the general commotion of people cleaning up after something serious. "Is he dead?" I asked quietly. "He's no longer a threat to you or our family." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you need." I sank into Vincent's chair, overwhelmed by the implications. Dmitry Volkov was dead. Vincent had killed him, or had him killed, because he'd threatened me. A man was dead because I existed, because I was carrying Vincent's child, because I'd gotten caught up in a world I'd never wanted to be part of. Vanessa, are you still there? I'm here. I need you to listen to me. Volkov's death is going to create a power vacuum in the Russian organization. There will be a period of instability while they figure out succession, and during that time, they might try to blame me for starting a war. Did you start a war? I ended one. Vincent, I need you to stay exactly where you are. Don't leave the house. Don't go outside. Don't let anyone in except people you know. I'm handling the fallout, but it's going to take time. How much time? A few days, maybe a week. Just until the Russians accept the new reality and decide they're better off making peace than continuing a fight they can't win. And if they don't accept it, then we'll deal with that when it happens. The casual way he discussed potential ongoing warfare made my stomach churn. This was my life now. Violence and consequences, and the constant awareness that loving Vincent Delacroix meant living in the shadow of his enemies. I want to see you, I said. You will. Soon. I just need to make sure everything is secure first. Where are you staying? Safe house. Neutral territory. Somewhere they can't find me while I negotiate with their new leadership. How do you know they'll want to negotiate? Vincent's laugh was sharp, humorless. Because I made sure they understand the cost of not negotiating. What does that mean? It means Dmitry Volkov wasn't the only person who died tonight. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not just one death, but multiple deaths. Not just an execution, but a massacre. Vincent hadn't just eliminated a threat. He'd sent a message written in blood. How many people? I whispered. Enough. Vincent. I did what I had to do to protect you, he said, his voice growing hard. I did what any man would do when someone threatens his family, and I'd do it again without hesitation. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that there had to have been another way, but the truth was that men like Dmitry Volkov didn't respond to weakness or mercy. They responded to strength, to fear, to the kind of overwhelming violence that made further resistance seem pointless. When will you be home? I asked instead. 2 days, maybe 3. I'll call you tomorrow with an update. Be careful. I'm always careful. You just worry about taking care of yourself and the baby. After he hung up, I sat in the silence of his study and tried to process what had happened. Somewhere across the city, crime scene investigators were probably documenting a bloodbath. Somewhere, Russian gangsters were trying to figure out how to respond to the death of their leader. Somewhere, Vincent was orchestrating the aftermath with the same cold efficiency he brought to every aspect of his business. And here I was, safe in my gilded cage, protected by walls and guards, and the reputation of a man who'd proven tonight exactly how far he was willing to go to keep me. The next morning brought news that confirmed my worst fears. Maria delivered my breakfast, along with a newspaper that she clearly didn't want me to see, but felt I needed to know about. Mr. Vincent said you should hear this from us, not from the television, she said quietly. The headline was stark. Gang war erupts. 7 dead in downtown warehouse shooting. 7 people. Vincent had killed 7 people to protect me. I read the article with growing horror. The police were calling it a gang dispute, a territorial conflict that had escalated beyond control. There were quotes from neighbors who'd heard gunfire, speculation about Russian organized crime connections, and a statement from the police commissioner promising a thorough investigation. Will this come back to Vincent? I asked Maria. Mr. Vincent is very careful about these things, she said diplomatically. He has precautions in place. Alibis, resources, which meant he'd bought his way out of trouble before the trouble started. Police who would look the other way, Officials who would file reports pointing toward gang violence rather than organized assassination, forensic evidence that would somehow fail to materialize. I spent the day in a strange state of suspended animation. The house felt different without Vincent. Less alive, less safe, despite the increased security presence. I tried to read, tried to eat, tried to focus on anything other than the fact that 7 people were dead because of me. That evening, the phone rang again. "How are you feeling?" Vincent asked without preamble. "Guilty. Don't." 7 people, Vincent. 7 people died because of me. 7 people died because they made the mistake of threatening you. 7 people died because their boss thought he could use my family against me. 7 people died because they chose the wrong side in a conflict they didn't have to be part of. That's not how guilt works. Then let me carry the guilt. It's my burden, not yours. How can you be so calm about this? Vincent was quiet for a moment before answering. Because this is what I do, cara mia. This is who I am. I eliminate threats to my family by whatever means necessary. The alternative is letting those threats grow until they become impossible to handle. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with you being safe. I'm okay with our child growing up protected. I'm okay with everyone knowing that harming the people I love has consequences that are swift and final. His matter-of-fact tone should have horrified me. Instead, it filled me with a strange sense of security. Vincent wasn't conflicted about what he'd done because he saw it as necessary, justified, the natural consequence of threatening his family. In his world, love was protected through violence, and family was defended through fear. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait to see how the Russians respond. They'll probably try to save face, make some noise about revenge and honor. But ultimately, they're businessmen. They'll realize that continued conflict is bad for everyone's bottom line. And if they don't, then we'll remind them why it's better to be our friends than our enemies. More violence, if necessary. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my situation settling over me like a shroud. This was my life now. This was what loving Vincent meant, accepting that he would kill for me without hesitation, that our safety would always come at the cost of other people's lives, that the beautiful house and the protection and the love came with blood on the foundation. Vanessa, I'm here. I need you to know something. I need you to understand that everything I do, every choice I make, it's all about protecting you and our child. I don't expect you to approve, and I don't need you to understand. But I need you to know that I would rather die than let anything happen to either of you. I know. And I need you to know that this, the violence, the killing, the warfare, this isn't normal. This isn't how our life will be. This is an exception, a necessary response to an extraordinary threat. Once this is resolved, things will go back to normal. What's normal for us? Quiet, peaceful, safe. A beautiful house, good food, people who care about you, books and music and whatever makes you happy. Watching our child grow up protected and loved and free to choose their own path. You make it sound like a fairy tale. It can be, if you let it. Fairy tales don't have bodies in warehouses. No, Vincent agreed. But they do have happy endings. We talked for another hour, about the baby, about names we liked, about the nursery he wanted to have designed, about the future he was building through violence and blood. By the time we hung up, I felt calmer, but also more conflicted than ever. The third day brought news that changed everything again. I was reading in the library when Maria found me, her expression more serious than I'd ever seen it. "Miss Vanessa," she said carefully. "Mr. Vincent is on his way home, but there's something else, something important." "What?" "The Russian organization has a new leader, Dmitri's nephew, Alexei Volkov. He's young, ambitious, and he doesn't believe in the old ways of doing business. My stomach clenched. What does that mean? It means he sees his uncle's death as an opportunity rather than a tragedy. He wants to make a deal. What kind of deal? The kind that ends this conflict permanently. Before I could ask what that meant, I heard the sound of cars in the driveway. Vincent was home. I met him at the front door, and the sight of him took my breath away. He looked tired but triumphant, wearing a fresh suit but carrying the weight of 3 days of negotiation and violence. When he saw me, his expression softened into something approaching relief. "It's over," he said simply. "What's over?" "The war, the threat, all of it." He pulled me into his arms then, holding me tight against his chest like he was afraid I might disappear. I could feel the tension draining out of him, the careful control finally relaxing. "What happened?" I asked against his shoulder. Alexei Volkov is smarter than his uncle. He understands that peace is more profitable than war, that cooperation serves everyone's interests better than conflict. "What did you offer him?" "Partnership, a share of certain operations, territory that wasn't particularly valuable to us anyway, an assurance that his uncle's death was personal rather than business." "And he accepted?" "He accepted. The Russian organization gets to save face, we get to expand our legitimate business interests, and you get to stop worrying about men with guns coming for our family." Vincent pulled back to look at me, his hands framing my face with gentle intensity. "It's over, cara mia. Really over. We can start planning our future without looking over our shoulders." "What about the 7 people who died? What about them?" "Don't you feel anything? Guilt, regret, responsibility?" Vincent considered the question seriously. "I feel relieved that the threat to you is gone. I feel satisfied that our enemies now understand the cost of targeting our family. I feel grateful that our child will grow up in a world where people think twice before threatening what's mine." "That's all?" "That's enough." I studied his face, looking for any sign of the conflict I felt he should be experiencing. But all I saw was certainty, the absolute conviction of a man who'd done what needed to be done and would do it again without hesitation. "I don't know if I can live with that," I said quietly. "You don't have to live with it," Vincent replied. "I live with it. You live with the safety and security it provides." "It's not that simple." "It is that simple. The world is divided into people who matter to me and people who don't. The people who matter get my protection, my loyalty, my love. The people who don't get whatever they deserve based on their actions." "And the 7 people who died?" "Chose to threaten the person who matters most to me in the world. They got what they deserved." The absoluteness of his moral framework should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with something I was afraid to examine too closely. In Vincent's world, I mattered more than anything else. I was protected by a devotion so complete, it justified any action, any sacrifice, any violence. It was terrifying and intoxicating in equal measure. "Come," Vincent said, taking my hand. "I want to show you something." He led me upstairs to a room I'd never seen before, a nursery that had been designed and furnished while I was sleeping. Soft yellow walls, white furniture, toys and books, and everything a baby could need. In the corner sat a rocking chair that looked like it had been handcrafted, positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon light from the window. "When did you do all this?" I asked. "I've been working on it for 2 years, having it updated as we got closer to this moment. You were that sure I'd come back? I was that hopeful our child would have a proper home." I moved to the crib, running my hand over the smooth wood of the railing. Everything was perfect, beautiful, safe. A child could grow up in this room surrounded by love and protection, and every advantage money could buy. Our child will never want for anything. Vincent said softly. They'll be educated at the best schools, travel anywhere they want to go, have access to opportunities most people can only dream of. And they'll know that it all comes with blood money. They'll know that their father loved them enough to fight for their future. I turned to face him, this impossible man who could kill 7 people one day and design a perfect nursery the next. Is this what you want for them? This life? I want them to have choices. Real choices, backed by real power and real security. If they choose to join the family business, they'll be welcomed and trained and eventually take over everything I've built. If they choose a different path, they'll have the resources and protection to pursue it safely. And if they choose to oppose what you do, Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then they'll discover what it means to be loved by someone who disagrees with their choices but supports them anyway. You'd protect them even if they became your enemy? They could never be my enemy. They're my child, my blood, my legacy. Nothing they could do would change that. The certainty in his voice undid me completely. Whatever else Vincent was, whatever violence he was capable of, his love for our unborn child was already absolute. Our baby would grow up knowing they were cherished, protected, and free to choose their own path. Maybe that would be enough. Marry me, Vincent said suddenly. What? Marry me. Tonight, tomorrow, as soon as it can be arranged. I want our child to be born legitimate. I want you to have my name and my protection, legally as well as personally. And I want the world to know that you belong with me. Vincent, I know it's fast. I know everything about this situation is complicated and difficult and not what either of us planned. But I love you. You love me. We're having a child together. And we've just proven that we can survive anything the world throws at us. Surviving and thriving are different things. Then let's thrive. Let's build something beautiful together. Let's show our child what it looks like when 2 people choose each other, despite impossible circumstances. I looked around the perfect nursery, thought about the past few days of violence and negotiation, and Vincent orchestrating our safety through methods I couldn't approve of, but couldn't deny the effectiveness of. If I marry you, I said slowly, I need certain promises. Name them. I need to know that you'll try to keep the worst of your business away from our family. I don't want our child growing up surrounded by violence. Agreed. I need to know that if I ever say enough, if I ever reach a point where I can't handle this life anymore, you'll let me leave. Vincent's expression grew very serious. And our child would stay with you. I understand that much. Then yes, if you ever reach that point, I'll let you go. And I need to know that you'll keep trying to be the man I fell in love with, not just the Don who protects his territory. I've never stopped being that man. The question is whether you can love both sides of who I am. I studied his face, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd killed for me without hesitation and designed a nursery with equal care. Who'd spent 3 years hoping I'd come home and 3 days orchestrating the elimination of our enemies. Who could whisper poetry in Italian and order executions with the same passion. Yes, I said finally. I can love both sides of who you are. The smile that spread across Vincent's face was like sunrise after the longest winter. Is that a yes to the proposal too? That's a yes to everything. To marrying you, to building a life together, to raising our child in this impossible world you've created. It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Vincent kissed me then, soft and gentle and full of promise. It tasted like hope and danger and a future we'd build together one choice at a time. When we broke apart, I touched the pendant at my throat one more time. New beginnings? New beginnings, Vincent confirmed. Rooted in love, reaching toward forever. Outside the nursery window, the sun was setting over our estate, painting everything gold and amber. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to prove that love could survive even in the darkest corners of the world. But tonight, we were together. We were choosing each other. We were promising to build something beautiful out of the ashes of everything that had come before. And for the first time since this all began, that felt like enough. More than enough. It felt like everything.